technically at 19, at 43, but can. It says, and the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, we have 10 shares in the king, and in David also we have more than you. Why then do you despise us? Were we not the first to speak of bringing back our king? But the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. Now there happened to be there a worthless man whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite, and he blew the trumpet and said, we have no portion in David, and we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel. So all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri, but the men of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. And David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to care for the house, and put them in a house under guard, and provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. Then the king said to Amasa, call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself. So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed him. And David said to Abishai, now Sheba the son of Bichri will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, lest he get himself to fortified cities and escape from us. And there he went out after him, Joab's men and the Cherethites and the Pelethites and all the mighty men. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba the son of Bichri. But when they were at the great stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened on his thigh. And as he went forward, it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, it is well with you, my brother. Is it well with you, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not observe the sword that was in Joab's hand. So Joab struck him with it in the stomach and spilled his entrails to the ground without striking a second blow, and he died. Then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba, the son of Bichri, and one of Joab's young men took his stand by Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. And Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the highway, and anyone who came by, seeing him, stopped. And when the man saw that all the people stopped, he carried Amasa out of the highway into the field and threw a garment over him. When he was taken out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. And Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-makkah, and all the Bichrites assembled and followed him in. And all the men who were with Joab came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-makkah. They cast upon a mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart, and they were battering the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, listen, listen, tell Joab, come here that I may speak to you. And he came near her. And the woman said, are you Joab? He answered, I am. Then she said to him, listen to the words of your servant. And he answered, I am listening. Then she said, they used to say in former times, let them but ask counsel at Abel. And so they settled the matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord? Joab answered, far be it from me, far be it, that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not true. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim, called Sheba, the son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give up him alone, and I will withdraw from the city. And the woman said to Joab, behold, his head shall be thrown to you over the wall. Then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, every man to his home. And Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel, and Benai, the son of Jehoiada, was in command of the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And Adoram was in charge of the forced labor, and Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, was the recorder, and Sheba was secretary, and Zodak and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jerite was also David's priest. Okay, I want to get that whole long narrative out of the way for us. So you remember in 19 there was a rebellion that was put down, right? Absalom got killed, and if we were reading the story and didn't know what was happening afterwards, we'd say, okay, that ended it. That was the end of the struggle. But apparently not. No. Right? Sometimes when you're just knocking out the symptoms, you're not really taking care of the real core problem. There is a core problem here. Okay. So observations, comments.
Well, it's interesting that Sheba was a Benjamite.
Yes.
Because that's from the same tribe as Saul.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's
an interesting thing there.
Yeah, there's still some kind of loyalty to Saul in some form or fashion. If you ever looked on the map, Benjamite, Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin is right. He's technically in the northern kingdom, right above Judah. That's where Benjamin's tribe is. So they're like right close to Judah, but they consider themselves the northern tribes here. And that's that in verse 43. That was that Israel fighting, or arguing with the men of Judah, is what that was. So seems like. By the way, does anyone have the NIV? Or
I can switch to.
No, that's okay. I just that phrase, a worthless man. I think the NIV has it as troublemaker on it.
Troublemaker.
Troublemaker, yeah.
That's what it says.
And so that's it. So I don't think that it's necessarily just a worthless man, as in some bum or so somebody like that. But worthless in that you're not helping, right? That's the troublemaker part of that. So I think that's an insightful observation too. That it's usually those type of people that really stir the pot. There always seems to be people that want drama in this world. That always are. They just like come out of the woodwork to cause problems, like a roach. They come out to.
Yeah, and you always got one or two or a few in the church, in the workplace, and wherever that. Yeah, wherever you're at here.
Okay, so sorry, my Kindle just said I was low battery, so didn't know that was an inspiration from God. All of a sudden, I got a message. Anyways, so he says, basically he's saying, hey, come on, we have no portion in David. In other words, we're going to take and secede from the nation. We're getting out. And apparently, for the moment, as we see in verse 2, all of the men of Israel do withdraw, so they all just go. But there's following this guy, and then there's really following this guy. And we'll see later in here that they don't all continue with that threat. But the men of Judah followed the king steadfastly from the Jordan to, they're holding their ground. When you have arguments, sometimes it's the words that you exchange that that cause more of the problem than the actual problem itself. Because tempers flare, and you start saying things that like death to our enemies, and so you escalate up this here.
Yeah, you think about what this whole argument was about, is who was going to walk the king back to Jerusalem.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, basically, that's what that was the argument.
Right.
That.
We are a larger group. We're 10 shares, so we should have the right to, be very involved, very involved.
Yeah.
More important.
Right, because it's only Judah and Simeon. They're the only other tribe. And it's just two. And then Judah's on the other side. Hey, he's from our home country. He's our homeboy.
Yeah.
That's what the argument is about. How, from a standpoint from our view, how trivial is that?
Right. And then you think about how churches split over similar things.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and then they always seem to couch it in nice religious terms.
Right.
The Lord is guiding us to this direction or whatever. Not that to say that there aren't legitimate problems, even in a church that may need to split or not split. Not to say that, but oftentimes most splits that I've observed
Right.
have just been because people want their own way, certain
Right.
things,
Exactly.
and it's not really God's.
It's a challenge
It is.
for people to get along.
It really is. It really is.
In families and churches and
Yeah.
otherwise.
And workplaces and everything. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very too much. Makes you wonder why God made us that way, huh? So we get to verse 3, and verse 3 is really, when you first read it, it's like weird.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But it's more, some of the commentaries I read said it's just parenthetical. It's following up on the 10 concubines that David had left there at the palace. And as a reminder, when Absalom came to the palace, he laid with them.
Yeah.
Okay? So and publicly,
Yeah.
he
Right.
laid with them.
Right.
So here's David, not killing them or anything, but basically saying, I'm no longer going to be with you because of that here, and but I will set you up and I will provide for you, and till you'll live like widows. So that's just a side note there. So verse 4 continues the story back again. And then the king said to Amasa, call the men of Judah together. So Amasa, do you remember who he is?
Yeah, he was the guy, the new guy that David put in charge.
Right, he replaced
Of the
Joab.
military, right.
Of the military, right?
He was, what you call it, head of his military, right?
Right, he was a part of Absalom's
Absalom's
military. He was the
military.
commander of the army of
Yes,
Absalom.
yes.
Right, so he replaced him. So so David goes and gets Amasa to, bring the men of Judah together. That's the soldiers, really, to be with me 3 days. And it has to do with what he's going to do with this Sheba guy here, is what that has to do with. So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed, which is important, beyond the set time. So who knows?
Why did he delay?
Why did he delay? It could have been any kind of, there's maybe an assumption here that he delayed for one reason or the other. They didn't have cell phones back there, so they couldn't call back and say, hey, we got some flat tires, and then we had to stop for a Pepsi. There was no understanding, so it's just a huge assumption here. So he goes and brings Abishai, okay, and says this about Sheba is still going to do us more harm than Absalom. Okay, so he's trying to take care of the situation, this succession here. So he tells him to go pursue him. And so in 7, and there went out after him Joab's men, the Cherarites and the Pelethites and all the mighty men. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. Amasa came to meet him. Now, this is a story of where Joab is going to kill Amasa. I believe, if I am correct, Amasa is the brother of Joab. Okay, he's Joab's brother. Amasa is. So it's an interesting. Now remember, Amasa and Joab were on opposite sides. They were
Right.
the two commanding armies here. But verse 9 says, and Joab said to Amasa, "Is it well with you, my brother?" So, and there was some other place about where I saw that he was his brother somewhere. With it. And so Joab just ends justify the means with Joab all the time. Because he goes and basically kills his brother, Amasa.
Or
Here.
one dictionary said cousin.
Cousin, yeah. So it very close relative. Maybe is what that's all about. Maybe that's what I understood it to be. Thanks. So a family member of some form, some relation, right? Of course, some would say, who aren't they related to? But, and so he kills him. Joab has always been that way. He's killed before. He's murdered before. And my only guess is, as we're looking at this is a person that doesn't want the competition. He wants to stay in power. He wants to be there. Wasn't satisfied with just being replaced, and even go off to retirement like old generals. But
he was ruthless.
yeah, he was. He was.
Although David did commission him,
Yeah.
so he must still trust him.
Yeah, in some form of fashion here. Yeah.
The interesting thing here is that David doesn't send Joab.
No, he sends
He
Amasa.
tells, but he tells Abishai.
Abishai, yeah.
And then for some, then it switches.
Right,
because it says then Joab's men, okay, and then you find out that
It was Joab.
it was Joab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and that Joab was dressed
Yeah.
in military attire.
I probably read that area about 3 or 4 times trying to
Yeah.
figure out the who's what where kind of thing, because it is a big.
It's almost
confusing-
like Joab just happened to,
Yeah.
he wasn't in charge. He just happened to be.
He interjected himself.
Yeah,
Be in
exactly.
charge.
Yeah.
And then it's weird that it says, now Joab was dressed in military attire, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath,
Yep.
fastened in its waist, and as he went forward, he fell out.
Right.
So the sword falls out, and he just picks up the sword. So is that just a ploy?
Yeah.
To have it in his hand and say, "Oh, I dropped that."
Oh, I'm
you know?
sorry, I dropped that. Come here, let me kiss you.
It kind of sounds like it, yeah.
Twist. Yeah. Yeah. It is a mess here. Okay, so we see Joab struck him, and then there's a story about Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba the son, and so they get into the basically of how they were going to kill this Sheba person. That's what the rest of this story is about. And this wise lady was here. And then it ends out in 23 and through 25 about now Joab was now in the command of the army of Israel. It didn't say of Judah, by the way, just of Israel. So I'm not sure yet. So this is the Confederates versus the Union soldiers, I guess. I don't know. Here, and then some of the organization of David. I wanted to, let me see if I can get to it real quick. So I do back. And back one here. I wanted to go to Romans chapter 16. There was something about this. I wanted to tie all back together again. Romans 16 verses 17 and I believe it's through 18. Let's see. 17. So Paul says, I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to the doctrine that you have been taught. Avoid them. For such persons do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites, and by smooth talk and flattery they deceive the hearts of the naive. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's great counsel here. I think Paul was, has been through the history, right? He knows the history of Israel better than we do, and he's using that as a foundation about watch out for the deceivers, these that are going to cause strife. In your groups, and I think that's a wise approach. I know that we try to seek unity at all times in all things, but we also have to acknowledge when there are just those in the church, those in our groups that are just there to cause trouble, and avoid them or deal with them directly. Yeah.
Paul even addresses that in. I'm trying to find the exact location, but the whole he goes through the whole thing about the whole area about women, whether women should have their head covered, and
Right.
that whole thing in the church. Yeah. And at the end of that section, it says pretty much, this is the way that we do things. Don't be contrary.
Right.
In other words, don't argue for just the sake of argument. If you don't like the way we do these things, then you either agree to disagree, or
Right.
or you're not a part of us, one or two. But don't cause dissension just to cause dissension.
Right, right.
You know, so,
Exactly.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay, well, we're gonna stop here.
yeah, it's a challenge to know how to get along in the give and take, and then, but then sometimes legitimately deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of knowing, you know, I mean, it says that we're supposed to prefer others above ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the things that are not important, if it keeps peace, you know, that's what we should strive for.
Right.
And for those things that are
Right.
that are important is where we stand our ground on. But sometimes that balance is not the
Right.
easiest,
And that's that-
easiest thing to find, you
It
know.
really is.
Wisdom,
That's the wisdom that is needed, right?
Yeah, it's needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how can we pray for you guys?